So what qualifies me and what would be my highest priorities? So qualifications, I have a long career in business, specifically in the financial services industry, working with entrepreneurs and business owners to help them build their businesses as well as provide for the future and the goals they have for themselves and their families. My career spans almost 40 years in that realm. Additionally, I've held public office before. I'm not a Chattanooga native. I moved here with my family about 4.5 years ago from the Chicago area. And while our tenure up there was pretty long, I ran for the Board of Education of a fairly large school district in which we were residing, one of the largest school districts in Illinois outside of Chicago, and I was elected to that Board of Education. So yeah, I do have experience in, let's call it, the political realm. Additionally, I've spent a good deal of my adult life in volunteer activities, right, with organizations focused on assisting and providing support for individuals with disabilities, early childhood, and of course, being on a public school board of education with education generally. So I think when you take a look at that whole package, I bring a pretty good skill set or background to running for the city council. Highest priorities, I would say number one, I live in a district that was impacted by the tornado. In fact, my family lost our house in the tornado. So I fully understand what it means to need help. I think our representation on the city council, given that event and certainly the pandemic, which is affecting all of us, I think our representation in District 4 can be upgraded and be a little more better and more responsive. And I think the priority obviously would be recovery, right? Certainly for the district, certainly for those impacted by tornado, impacted by COVID, and those impacts have been, as we all know, very widespread and very deep. And then I would say two more priorities. One certainly, and we hear this, it's our roads, the quality of our roads, our infrastructure. I call it, we're living in a city with 21st century technology, but we're driving on 20th century roads, right? And so if we're going to grow and continue to build Chattanooga for the future, we're going to have to upgrade, we're going to have to attend to that infrastructure. As part of that as well, it includes issues about mobility and how we are able to have our entire population be mobile and move around. Aside from roads, our public transportation, right, is an area that definitely needs some focus and upgrade so that all of our citizens, right, have an opportunity to be able to get around and upgrade, and provide for themselves and their families. And then, um, and then finally, obviously, we have talked about issues in Chattanooga for a very long time, right? About quality of life. Um, uh, how do we deal with populations in lower to moderate incomes, right? Questions of equity. Those are all questions that are out there. And certainly that must be a priority if we're going to grow forward. So I've gone down a very long-winded path, but that I would say in a concise package, or maybe not so concise, is how I look at the city council run.
Excellent. And we're certainly going to touch on some of those facets of Chattanooga here in just a second. But we'll move into the budget. As we near a year since the virus hit Chattanooga, businesses and individuals within the city are struggling due to COVID-19 as well. How would you provide aid to those businesses and families hit hardest by the pandemic and its economic impact? Are there programs in place you'd want to keep, and what other programs would you add?
Well, that's a really great question, and I think our whole world is dealing with that question. But let's focus on Chattanooga. I think to the extent that they can, the city council to date has kind of dealt with that with some I would call it maybe emergency or added funding, whether that's for businesses or for families particularly hard hit with like rent assistance and food assistance, those types of things. I think we need to kind of keep looking for those opportunities to do that. Um, one of the other things, if you take a look at the city's financial picture and their budget, the city does have an unrestricted fund balance, right? And that's in excess of about $70 million. Now, that's something maybe to take a look at, right? Is that something? Clearly, prudent fiscal management requires you to set up reserves and make sure you have something put away, right? It helps your city's bond rating. It helps, your overall ability to provide services. But, to the extent that would be a rainy day set aside, we're definitely in a rainy day. We're in a storm, right? And so, whether by ordinance or what mechanism, to me, that would be one place to look. Could we go into that reserve fund, if you will, and find extra funding that could provide some additional assistance to businesses and families as we go through COVID and get to wherever that's going to be once we kind of get through that. Um, Another thing relative to the budget, and I think there's validity to it, the city uses a budgeting for outcomes method, and it's almost like an RFP process where they go out and solicit, if you will, potential projects or uses for funding. I think we need to go kind of through the budget and see what is there that really maybe shouldn't be on an annual basis, is something we should keep on going that could apply and help through COVID. And I do worry about that a little bit. With this election, there is going to be a turnover in mayor, and there's going to be a turnover on city council, one way or the other. And certainly the mayor has the discretion. So outgoing Mayor Burke is going to do a budget, but the incoming mayor has the ability to change that. So I think we need to be very cautious and keep in the front windshield, COVID, and what are the things that we can do, what are we doing, and what can we do in that budget to help families and businesses as we go through this.
You talked about road structure. So paving and transportation consistently rank at the top of citizens' top concerns, according to annual studies by the city. What transportation or infrastructural goals would you have if elected to District 4?
Well, I'd certainly look for and advocate a set road improvement, uh, road upgrade plan. It's something like, companies have a capital budget expenditure, right? They plan out for a year, 2 years, 3 years. What are kind of the capital investments we're going to need to make? I think the city needs to do that and be much more focused on developing that plan uh, for the city roads going forward. Um, I think, if you look at the budget and kind of project it out, the city has put into its 5-year projection some increased spending on road, which is, it's good to see, but even at the levels they're projecting, how much impact is that gonna have? And so I think there needs to be look at, where can we find additional sources in the budget that could even enhance that commitment and that allocation moving forward. On the transportation side, one way or the other, we're going to have to deal with the public transportation. Whether CARTA is CARTA the answer, CARTA has certainly been cut back over the years, or is there uh, some other mechanism to be created, or can we enhance CARTA or evolve that to deal with some of the some of the ways we allow people to get around our entire area. I think that's something that probably is a little bit longer term view, and we're going to need to get people in addition to the city together to figure out how that happens and what that looks like.
We're going to move into some business and economy questions, Mr. Lloyd. City
Sure.
labor unions and many activists support a $15 minimum wage for city employees, which Mayor Burke had intended to begin implementing prior to COVID. Do you support this or any other specific pay increase plans for city employees? Why and why not?
Okay. So I just want to make sure, is your question focusing specifically on city employees?
Yep. So city labor unions and many activists, support that $15 minimum wage for city employees. So yep, just solely city employees.
Okay. So here's what I would say as it relates to city employees. Clearly, if you talk to city employees, there is a feeling that, man, they do a lot of work and wages are just not, you know, they're not being paid comparable to what that work would, typically be worth, or what they would find in other cities, or whatever. I think, the city employees, whatever department they're in, they're the backbone of what we rely on. And so I do think for that, city employees, I think that's something that definitely should be considered.
Okay. In 2019, 40% of Chattanooga's households are housing cost burdened, meaning they pay more than 30% of their income for housing and may struggle to afford other necessities. How would you address affordable housing in District 4?
Wow. You're talking about a topic that has kind of been circling our country you know, for a long, long time. Um, I would say this, it's clearly an issue that needs to be addressed. How do we address it in the best way? In District 4, I mean, I would say we're robust with housing development, right? And it's probably higher grade housing for the most part. Um, and so you don't want to be blind to what's going on in significant parts of our city. I think the city can be a driver in bringing parties together that can look at ways to address that. And if you go in our community, there are a lot of people that have some good ideas or differing ideas about how to do that. We've got to find a way to bring those ideas together, those parties together, sort through you know, uh, what's a new idea, what's something that may work, right? That we haven't tried. Um, you know, it's something that, is only going to, in my opinion, unless we do that and do that with proactive purpose, it's a situation that I don't think is going to get better actually in Chattanooga. And so I would hope that the city again could be a driver in bringing folks together to dialogue and really kind of whiteboard and come up with those ideas that might be new and groundbreaking to deal with that.
Thank you. Let's touch on some public safety. Last fall, shootings in Chattanooga were up by 20% from the same time in 2019 and higher than any time in the last 5 years. How would you work as a council member to lower crime in your district?
Well, I'm not sure in my district, some of the shootings are as prevalent as in other districts of the city. So it's going to be important, I would think, for the council, as with any issue, to be working together to kind of understand what they're seeing and what are we seeing and what do we think we're hearing, and what's driving some of that. I personally think crime and the shootings in particular, I don't think it's just about crime. I think there are other issues underlying that, right? It's quality of the neighborhoods, quality of the community. What are we doing as far as, presenting alternatives and I think gangs, to some extent and a large extent, maybe come into the shootings. What are we doing to present alternatives to improve neighborhoods, improve living conditions? Show people, hey, here's a path, and give them the training or the guidance to get on alternative paths. Again, I think there are a lot of folks in our area that are working hard on that. But, again, that's one where I think the city can drive some consistent policies to address. And I think, and I give the Hamilton County Schools a lot of credit. They, I think, are doing everything they can, not only to educate, but to try to improve lives, especially in affected communities. So I think it's an issue that requires a comprehensive solution. I don't think you can just say, "Hey, we got to increase police or whatever, and crack down on gangs." I think it's a multifaceted, comprehensive approach to stem that kind of violence.
Activists spent the summer protesting police brutality across the country and in Chattanooga, demanding defunding or divesting from the police. Would you consider defunding or divesting from CPD for reform? In what other ways, if any, would you consider law enforcement reform?
Yes, I don't support defunding the police. If we're looking to grow Chattanooga and to attract new businesses and to grow existing businesses, uh, those businesses and those families behind those businesses want to know that they are in a safe city. And quite frankly, the foundational role of government is to provide, protect life, property, and livelihood. And I think defunding the police works against the foundational basis of government. You can have reform, right, without defunding the police. And I think, I think that's ongoing. I think there's been some work done with that. The park is one way you kind of do that. I think the police department has existing programs where they try to dial in and be connected to the community. And maybe there's a little more awareness that can be put out there about how that outreach, neighborhood policing from CPD is going. But I think, we've got to maintain the foundational basis of providing a safe city. But at the same time, I don't think that precludes talking about reform or ways that we can improve accountability. One thing, you look at the budget, and a little concerning to me is that in the current year budget, there was a reduction in the amount allocated to police training and recruitment. It was a fairly substantial reduction there. And I think if we want to have a better, right, police force, a more accountable, more responsive, I think training is very important. And I think recruiting the right people is very important as well.
Thank you. Well, many have questioned the conduct of activists given vandalism, disruption to businesses, and confrontations with the police. Others have criticized law enforcement for restricting access to public areas, surveillance of activists on private property, and the nature of some arrests. If similar unrest came up during your term, how would you weigh restrictions for activists and police presence, and what would you have done differently?
I think it's situational. Certainly, our Constitution gives us, as citizens, the right to protest. And the question is, what is protest, right? And I think as long as protest is nonviolent, because then I think it crosses into a different area. I think people have the right to express their opinions and express concerns, and even outrage, but hopefully in a nonviolent way. I think thank goodness, I think Chattanoogans are pretty level-headed for the most part, and have relatively stable manners. But I think we'd have to look situationally at what would be driving something that would kind of go into that a little more severe type of a situation. But overall, yeah, I mean, people have the right to voice what their opinion is.
Speaking of voicing your opinion, do you support current city council restrictions on public input during meetings, or would you change these policies or make other efforts to encourage public input?
Yeah, that's a thing, isn't it? You go through the whole meeting and then you get, here comes the timer, boom, you got 3 minutes, and depending, that 3 minutes can go pretty fast. But
Yeah.
um, I think in any governmental body, they're trying to weigh the need to conduct appropriate city business and get through their agendas and deal with what needs to be dealt with, um, without, um, delay or having things perhaps make the meeting longer, go in a direction that might divert from the business that needs to be taken care of. I absolutely support community input, right? And maybe there's a way the council can set up another meeting maybe once a month, right? To just have community input, right? To hear folks voice their concerns or what's on their mind.
Thank you. Okay, just a few more here, Mr. Lloyd, as we
Sure.
wrap up. Have you received the COVID-19 vaccine? And if not, will you when it's available?
I have not received the COVID-19 vaccine. And I'm not really sure with all the things whether I'm at the point where I could get it, even if there are probably other populations that would be more in need of it. And I will be honest, I'm kind of weighing that whether I would get the vaccine. I think that with COVID, I still think even today, the medical community, science, even, I'm not sure they even have a full picture of what that is, right? And you look at some of the of our citizens that are impacted by that. There are some very severe cases. Obviously, death is bad, but those who survive, there's some that have these long-lasting effects. And so, in my mind, it's still, I'm a little bit holding off a bit just and see if there's more information that comes out so we clearly know what this is. And certainly with the vaccines, that's wonderful they came out so quickly, but I'd also kind of like to see, after widespread application of the vaccine, does it appear to be safe? Again, because the protocols and testing was so speeded up, I'm in that respect, I'm a little bit cautious. So um, still to be determined whether I will go have the vaccine when I'm eligible to do that.
What should the relationship between the mayor and city council look like? And will you cultivate relationships with the new administration?
I would hope so, to cultivate, and I think the council and the mayor should have a very collegial, very connected, open dialogue, open communication relationship. But as it now stands, right, the mayor is the chief executive, and the mayor has the ability to kind of run how they choose to run. I think the city certainly works a lot better when there's great connection and dialogue between the mayor and the council. And so I would hope that as we get through the election on March 2nd, we elect a mayor and a council that are very open to working together and anxious to work together.
All right, this is a little fun one here. Would you support public money for a new Chattanooga Lookout Stadium?
Ooh, that's a good question. Love the Lookouts, right? That's a good time going to the Lookouts game. Uh, Boy, I don't know about that. We have a lot of needs in Chattanooga, and not to disparage the importance of an icon or a community thing like the Lookouts, but you know, there are people that need housing, there are people that need food, right? And I don't know if the allocation of public monies to that supersedes the need to deal with some of the more basic life issues we need to deal with in the community.
All righty, and what else should the people of Chattanooga know about you, Mr. Lloyd? What should voters know? What would you like them to know?
Well, great question. I can be very passionate when need be, but at the same time, I would tell you that I probably have some really good listening skills. To me, in dealing with a person sitting across from me or in a group, listening, not just hearing, but listening is very important. And that's the foundation of how progress is made. Listen to people, listen to differing ideas, because heck, I certainly don't have anywhere near all the ideas, but collectively we might have some really great ideas. And the only way those are going to come out is if we listen. And so I hope I have really good listening skills. That's kind of some of the feedback I've gotten. But at the same time, when there are key issues, I can be very, very passionate and very advocate very much for it. I do know what it means to need help. As I mentioned, we lost our house in the tornado, but not just that. I've spent a great deal of time uh, working with organizations that advocate for those that are marginalized in our society, whether that's the disabled, whether that's those in low income neighborhoods or populations. Uh, those are kind of key, I would say, almost moral issues to me. So, I hope everybody will get out and vote on March 2nd. local government, local elections probably have more impact on us than others. And, it's very important, especially this election, because we will have a changeover in mayor and several, just because folks aren't running or running for our other offices, there will be several seats that will turn over. So be involved, be aware, and, get involved with voting with your local government.